Good evening. I'm Kelda Yoon. The Ford government is speeding up the timeline for grocery stores to expand their alcohol sales. Ready-to-drink cocktails will be allowed in stores as soon as Thursday. As Queen's Park reporter Lorena Redekop explains, it comes as a strike by thousands of LCBO workers drags on.
On a rainy picket line, striking LCBO workers are frustrated by the government's latest decision to allow expanded alcohol sales in grocery stores faster.
It strikes me as another example of not negotiating in good faith. There have been a lot of signs that the province is waiting for this strike to happen. Their level of planning, their level of preparation shows me that they were committed to it.
Grocery stores already selling beer and wine can add ready-to-drink cocktails as of Thursday, as well as beer in larger quantities, 2 weeks sooner than planned. The LCBO has said ready-to-drink cocktails are the sticking point for the union, that it won't agree to talks unless the province changes its expansion plans. Premier Doug Ford was asked about that.
That ship has sailed. We're moving forward with it, but they need to come to the table. The LCBO put an offer on the table. We have yet to see the leadership of OPSU come to the table.
The union, OPSU, says the Premier should be pushing the LCBO to get back to the table. It accuses Ford of interfering with bargaining by these sped-up changes, focusing on what it calls his harmful agenda that rewards large companies. One local distillery that makes a ready-to-drink cocktail fears only the biggest drink companies will benefit from this accelerated rollout.
Conversations with grocery stores, I've been reaching out, haven't necessarily gone anywhere. So, I understand that there's this encouragement to fast-track that. I'm not understanding of who the craft producers are that are going to be on those shelves.
He has those same concerns when it comes to the rest of the booze expansion plans, once corner stores are added.
I'm speaking with a cross-province convenience store. They were looking for $250,000 as a listing fee just to get on their shelf. And so who is going to have that? It's going to be some of the big players.
He just wants the strike to end to avoid layoffs, saying sales are way down without the LCBO. As for those ready-to-drink cocktails in grocery stores, you likely won't be able to buy them by Thursday. A spokesperson for the grocers says that's just the first date they can order them, and it'll take time to get them on store shelves. Lorena Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Earlier this month, the Ford government scrapped plans for a deposit return program for non-alcoholic drink containers, such as pop cans and water bottles. Well, today, an industry group that represents soft drink brands is pushing back on that reversal. It says the program would prevent billions of recyclables from going to landfills, adding that the plan was trashed because of big grocery. Brittany Billette has more.
In Ontario, billions of these containers wind up in dumps and incinerators annually. The province has the worst recycling rates in all of Canada for non-alcoholic beverage containers. Every other province, save Manitoba, has a refundable deposit on cans and bottles of juice, pop, and water.
We're way behind the rest of the country. Unacceptable.
The Canadian Beverage Association represents around 60 soda brands, including Pepsi and Coke. On Monday, it released a study that found a refundable 10-cent deposit would bring a 90% recycling rate if big grocery stores accept the empties.
The more locations you have, the more efficient the system is, the higher the return rate.
Ontario already has targets for the recovery and recycling of non-alcoholic beverage containers, 75% by 2026 and 80% by 2030. The current rate is about 50%. Some provinces, such as Alberta and BC, have recycling rates that are over 80%. But big grocers say implementing a deposit and return system in Ontario would cost shoppers too much money. The Retail Council of Canada, whose members include Loblaws and Costco, said it fully supported the Ontario government's decision. In a statement, a spokesperson wrote, "We applaud the government's approach because it avoids costs to customers while still holding companies to high targets. Twice now, the Canadian Beverage Association has proposed solutions that would see customers paying the recycling bills of companies like Coke and Pepsi, and this doesn't sit well with us." Environmental advocates and the beverage industry accuse big grocery chains of pressuring the government.
I think it's frustrating in the amount of power that they seem to have and the amount of influence that they seem to have over policy.
We invested a year's worth of time and energy and really good research, get that canceled last minute. without any consultation on where we see it. This is not fair.
Small independent grocers say they can't afford to give up retail space to accommodate returned empties.
We pushed back very aggressively on the idea that we had the space or the ability, or we should be taking these dirty containers back into the store. Are we willing to look at other options? Absolutely, but not return to retail.
CBC News requested an interview with Environment Minister Andrea Kangin about why she canceled the deposit return. Her team declined that request and instead sent a statement. It said the plan would have cost too much money for families and small businesses, but if retailers and producers wanted to come up with a cost-efficient system, it would welcome it. Brittany Billette, CBC News, Toronto.
Transit advocates are warning the aging subway trains currently in use along Line 2 will be out of commission by 2026. They're calling on the federal government to fund replacement trains. And as Tyler Cheese reports, they're bringing in some heavy hitters to support their cause.
The Line 2 trains here are getting very, very old. They're approaching the end of their design service life in 2026.
Advocacy group TTC Riders says it's time to do something about the aging trains on the Bloor-Danforth subway line.
It's our vital east-west link. Hundreds of thousands of riders depend on Line 2 every single day to get to where they need to go. If there are service interruptions, if there are subway shutdowns, then that means that people are late to work. That means that people are late to medical appointments and job interviews. Students are late to school.
The group is calling on the federal government to provide immediate funding to help the TTC replace those trains. And some at the federal level are already on board.
There's an incredible opportunity for the federal government to step up and invest in buying new trains and supporting with more permanent funding.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is the first member of parliament to pledge his support for the group's cause.
I'm making my commitment clear. I'm going to push the government towards making this commitment. So now we got to see the Liberals stand up and say, if you actually care about the city, we want to see you put your money where your mouth is and invest in transit.
The federal government has already committed to a permanent public transit fund, but that money won't be available to agencies like the TTC until 2026. That's the same year the current Line 2 trains are set to become obsolete.
As the TTC board and the City Council has said, is that if we don't have the trains soon, we have maybe about 18 months left in terms of the life of the trains. What is going to happen after that? Are there not going to be any trains, or are we going to have services completely interrupted?
CBC reached out to Infrastructure Canada for a response to the group's request, but did not hear back.
We just need the federal government to step up to the table and to commit to their fair share. It's the right thing to do.
TTC Riders is asking all Toronto MPs and federal leaders to pledge their support for more funding to replace the trains. Alongside Singh, Green Party leader Elizabeth May has also committed to signing the pledge. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
2 people have been arrested and 1 remains at large following a jewelry store robbery in Etobicoke. Police were called to the store inside Cloverdale Mall around 5 p.m. 1 male suspect was arrested after being located in a vehicle that had crashed north of the mall at Eglinton Avenue West and the East Mall. A second suspect was later arrested with the help of the K-9 unit. A third suspect is still outstanding. Anyone with information is asked to contact police. A major downtown intersection is closed this week. Bloor Street West and Spadina Avenue will be shut down until Sunday for construction work. Chris Glover has more on the intersection's makeover and how commuters are feeling about it.
Here at the intersection of Spadina and Bloor, it is messy, it is loud, and my goodness, is it driving some people up the wall. Take a look at this construction that is shutting this intersection. It'll be closed for the entire week until next Sunday, and the city says that this is required in order to resurface the roads here. They're also replacing sidewalks, planters, and they're also going to see improvements to the bike lanes. These are now going to be permanent and raised right across this stretch as well. So a lot of vital work is being done here, and yet some of the people that we spoke to today said that they were not so happy because obviously it is impacting every mode of transportation. Take a listen.
Well, I work right here in this building, so it's a little bit of an inconvenience for people that are commuting and for families and members of the community who use the facilities.
Stopping traffic on the main Bloor Street, and Spadina's pretty busy too, so that's not good.
Big pain in the butt. I just got some soot in my eye. That's why I have to wear these sunglasses. If anyone has pleasant feelings about these streets, I kind of question their ability to think.
This area, Bloor Street in general, but this area near Spadina and St. George, there's always closures, and it's always pretty awful, but especially closing down in the middle of the summer. Driving in this area is an absolute nightmare. It has been, and with big closures like this, it's even worse.
All right, so all this work is coming on top of work that's already been happening along Spadina. Many people have said that it's been a mess for months and for years, but last month it really became worse when the city decided to cancel the Spadina streetcar. And so instead of having the streetcar amid this work that was being done down there to the tracks and modernizing the wires, the Spadina streetcar was replaced by buses. And so the buses were running along this stretch instead of those streetcars. That saw a dramatic increase in commute times. It went from about 20 minutes all the way up to an hour. The city noticed that within the first week, and the TTC said that it had to make adjustments. So on the bottom end of Spadina, there were adjustments, and those replacement buses are now not going along Spadina from front down to Queens Quay. Instead, those buses are being rerouted around Blue Jays Way. The TTC says that has improved things a little bit, and the times are now down to about 40 minutes, but it's still higher than they want it to be. And this work here is also going to continue to impact things because those replacement buses used to come up here to Spadina Station, but given everything that's going on here and the construction work that's happening here, the TTC said obviously it can't do that. So now those buses are going over to St. George. Now, despite all this work and all these headaches that I've described to you, some people are looking at the bigger picture, and they're seeing that this work could lead to a better city down the line. I want you to listen to a couple people who are taking all of this in a bit of stride.
It's okay. Not, yes, not
don't
problem.
mind about the road being closed,
No.
the time it took, it's all good.
No, this is very okay. Everything good.
I think that everyone is too angry all the time.
Yeah.
both cyclists and people in cars.
So see, not everybody is mad about all this. Not everybody is angry. And just a reminder, it's only lasting for a week, so this will be cleared again by next Sunday. The other project that's impacting the Spadina streetcar, that is significantly longer. The TTC says that the streetcar is going to be out of commission. Those replacement buses will be being used until the end of the year. And the city says that it's going to be watching all of this very closely. The city and the TTC monitoring to see if other adjustments need to be made. There are going to be more agents along the line to help people navigate all this. And they say other changes could be coming. Those would need to be approved by council, and that could come later on this month. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. Sentencing is taking place in a Toronto court for the man behind an assault in 2023 that led to the death of a former CBC News employee. Robin Cropbeard-Wolf pleaded guilty earlier this year to a manslaughter charge in the death of Michael Finley. Cropbeard-Wolf assaulted the 73-year-old Finley in the Danforth and Jones area in January of last year. Finley, a longtime CBC News producer, fell to the ground and died a week later in hospital. The Crown is asking that Cropbeard-Wolf be sentenced to between 6 and 8 years in prison. Durham Regional Police have identified the victims of a double fatal shooting in Oshawa on Saturday. Patrick Montgomery and Andriana Montgomery, both 42 years old, were found with gunshot wounds at 2 separate addresses. A 30-year-old Oshawa man has been arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in their deaths. Police say the suspect was known to the 2 victims, but that it is not a domestic incident. Advocates for the unhoused are demanding emergency support for people experiencing homelessness, especially during weather events like the heat we've been experiencing lately. They say there's a disconnect between the city's approach and the reality on the ground. Dale Manuktuk reports.
The heat waves are crazy. There's nowhere to really go to cool yourself.
Donovan Hike has been living at the Allen Gardens encampment near Carleton and Jarvis for 2 weeks. It's the first time he's ever experienced homelessness.
Tim Hortons actually just started kicking people out unless you're actually purchasing something. So I go in and spend 20 cents on a cup, get some water, and I'll sit in there for 15 minutes and then I leave.
You know, the city says, hey, it's a heat wave, go inside, stay indoors, make sure to be air conditioned. Well, where are people supposed to go?
Standing across the street from the city's Shelter Central intake office, a group of advocates are calling on Toronto to open up emergency cooling centers. Right now, the city points to its heat relief network, which features more than 500 spaces across Toronto, like pools, libraries, civic centers, and malls. The heat relief strategy is meant to reduce the incidence of heat-related illness and death.
It's very clear that the city has not talked to people that are unhoused. I've been doing outreach, working with people who are unhoused for well over a decade, and places like malls, people who are unhoused get kicked out of malls because they're not spending money. They get kind of bugged for loitering.
The system is full, with Toronto sheltering more than 12,000 people and turning away hundreds every night. In a statement, the city's general manager of the shelter system writes, in part, "We recognize the challenges created by the unprecedented demand for shelter space we are experiencing in Toronto. Factors like the housing crisis, rising cost of living, and the record number of refugee claimants arriving in need of emergency shelter are all contributing to this strain on the City of Toronto shelter system."
It is inhumane to have a situation like that where people are forced to wait outside these doors looking for a bed. That's inhumane, it's cruel. These people are being abandoned.
A spokesperson for Mayor Olivia Chow says she's working to unlock additional spaces. They also point to the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefit funding that the mayor helped secure, which helped house more than 6,000 people last year. In addition to the cooling centers, advocates want the city to open up any available city-owned space and present a plan to increase emergency shelter spaces by at least 300 spots. The advocates are hoping the city changes its strategy when it meets for executive committee. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
The wet weather we got today made for a difficult evening commute for some. There was heavy pooling on the roads at Front and Lower Simcoe. And on the TTC, trains had to bypass St. Patrick and Christie stations due to flooding. And Colette, we saw some pretty heavy rains earlier today and likely some more tomorrow.
Yeah, there's no shortage of moisture with these clusters of storms that keep rolling on through. They're kind of moving along the jet stream, and that's just driving them right through the lower Great Lakes and through southern and eastern Ontario. And then along with the heavy rains and some of that flash flooding, even some of the hail that we've been experiencing in some of those clusters, there's still areas that are in the heat warning. So kind of bookended there between eastern Ontario and southwestern Ontario, where it's still in place. Now, there's cooler, drier air that's going to be moving in behind a cold front, but it doesn't really filter in or get ushered until midweek. So even in areas without a heat warning, still a little bit sticky through the day tomorrow until we get to that midweek, all right? And the temperatures, you can really see what happened as those rains from earlier were moving through. You know, London, there were reports of some areas with over 80 or even 90 millimeters of rain, and that was from earlier in the day. And that's where you see even a reading there in just the high teens because that heavier rain pulled the temperature down. And that's 10 a.m. So as we roll forward and go into the afternoon hours, we were seeing that into the early evening, pushing through the GTA. So the temperatures kind of dropped down there as it went through. And then once the cluster moved on, the temperatures popping back up a little bit as well. So that's sort of another impact that's been had by this. As we look through the overnight, it's going to be after 3 a.m. This is 4, a snapshot, I have it at 4, where the next round is moving through. So it's the overnight hours for southwestern Ontario, then the early morning hours as this begins pushing into cottage country here, so moving along the Bruce Peninsula towards Georgian Bay, but some of this having an impact on the city as well and the GTA. So maybe not as heavy as what some of it was today, but there's still going to be some clusters of storms tomorrow. So we'll deal with that kind of off and on, and then once that goes through and we get on the other side of that cold front is just the leading edge of a new air mass. So we'll get into that new air mass, and that's going to bring the dew points down, so becoming more comfortable and the air not as sticky there as we go into Wednesday with just the slimmest chance of an isolated shower. Overnight temperatures here, you'll see this is at 4 a.m. dropping down to around 20. We may not even get there, may hold a tiny bit warmer than that. 28 tomorrow, still going to feel like we're in those mid-30s. Into Wednesday, though, there you go, 24. That's that more comfortable air moving in, and then we'll just gradually build a little bit as we go towards next weekend, just getting back close to seasonal, in fact, on Saturday.
Thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
Major League Baseball is now in its all-star break. The Blue Jays have just one player taking part in the Midsummer Classic this year. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. will start at first base for the American League, and this will probably be a welcome distraction for the Jays slugger in what has been a disappointing season for his Blue Jays. Greg Ross takes a look.
Eugenio Suarez just hit one a ton.
There's no sugarcoating it. Things have simply not gone well for the Blue Jays this season.
Certainly not where the Blue Jays wanted to be and where most people around baseball expected them to be. This was a team that was supposed to be really, really good on paper.
The Blue Jays come into the All-Star break sitting in dead last in the American League East, 9.5 games out of a playoff spot. Many fans are already writing them off.
It's at the point where it's very predictable. You watch them get a lead, you watch them blow it. I find myself not cheering against the Jays, but sometimes going, yep, I'm going to predict this loss right now, and I was right.
It's tough because, I live across the street from the stadium, and, I used to love going to games, and now, they're not playing that well, so it's not that fun to go anymore.
Deep center.
For some, it's time to make big changes. With 2 weeks to go until the MLB trade deadline, some fans are ready to cut ties with some big stars, like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette, if it means building a stronger future.
I'd trade everyone and anyone you can get a good deal for, and you only have so much time with the group. I think those couple of years we saw come and gone in the playoffs didn't go so well. When things aren't working, it's time to shake things up.
Despite the fact that trade rumors have been swirling around Guerrero Jr. and Bichette for weeks now, the team has given no indication it's planning on parting ways with either player.
There is absolutely a case to be made that the Blue Jays should sell on their bigger pieces as well and try to net some return that allows them to be in a better position, say, in 2 or 3 seasons. It just doesn't seem like that is the approach that the front office is taking right now.
The Jays front office is running out of time to decide. The MLB trade deadline is on July 30th. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you back here tomorrow at 6. Have a great night, everyone.